Peter B. Collins, news and comment. It's Friday, September 23rd, 2016. This podcast now available on YouTube. And we've got downloads in Turkey, Canada, Switzerland, Thailand, and Cameroon. Hello to all listeners tuned in around the globe. And I have news and comment for you today from the left coast of the United States of America. And we are continuing the look at Charlotte, North Carolina on the East Coast, where the controversy continues and the police department maintains it will not release its videos of the shooting death of the individual who is known as Keith Scott. And we now have a new video that was shot by Keith Scott's wife during this encounter with police officers near their home. And it is shocking. It is really outrageous. And I want to play the audio for you. You'll be able to find it in social media and at commercial news operations almost anywhere on the internet today. And I think this is going to put increased pressure on the Charlotte-Mecklenburg Police Department to stop acting so arrogantly and release the videos that they have. And I don't know that they will be conclusive, but playing hide and seek, as we learned in Chicago, and as we've seen on the flip side of the coin in Tulsa, well, it has consequences. This is the tape that was shot by Keith Scott's wife, and her name is Rakea. We do learn some interesting new things from this recording.
Don't shoot him. Don't shoot him. He has no weapon. He has no weapon. Don't shoot him.
Now we see another police car pull up.
Don't shoot him. Don't shoot him. He didn't do anything.
Those are cops yelling, drop the gun.
He doesn't have a gun. He has a TBI. He's not going to do anything to you guys.
He has a traumatic brain injury, and he just took his medicine, she says. Now, that's new information.
Keith, don't let them break the windows. Come on out the car. Keith, don't do it.
She seems to be about 20 feet away, and there is a police vehicle between her and her husband.
Keith, don't you do it. Don't you do it. Keith, don't you do it.
Now, we don't know what she means by don't you do it.
Did you shoot him? He better not be fucking dead.
And we heard a barrage of shots there from the cops.
I know that fucking much. I know that much. He better not be dead. I'm not going to come near you. I'm going to record, though. I'm not coming near you. I'm going to record, though. He better be alive, because I'm coming.
Obviously, an officer is telling her to stay back.
Yes, we're over here at 9453 Lexington Court.
Keith Scott is lying on the ground, appearing lifeless.
He better live, because he didn't do nothing to them.
And the police are not ignoring him. They do appear to be tending to him. And then she asks if they've sent for an ambulance.
I know he better live. How about that? I'm not coming to you guys, but he better live. He better live. Y'all hear this and you see this, right? He better live. He better live. I swear he better live. Yep. He better live. He better fucking live. He better live. Where is... He better fucking live, and I can't even leave the damn... I ain't going nowhere. I'm in the same damn spot. The fuck? That's okay. Did y'all call the police? I mean, did y'all call an ambulance?
Did y'all call the police? That's an interesting slip. Because obviously the police wouldn't have helped. But did they call an ambulance? And that's where the tape cuts off. So the refusal of Chief Kerr Putney of the Charlotte-Mecklenburg Police Department to go beyond, he's shown the video to family members. He has described it as inconclusive. He says that, you can't tell what is in Scott's hands from the videos. And so I understand that they may not produce any kind of conclusion or detailed information beyond what we already know. But the biggest problem here is the suspicion that the cops are covering up. And police officers don't seem to understand this, police administrators. The lack of trust because of the repeated cover-ups that have been exposed by citizen-shot videos, and sometimes the police department's own body cams or dash cams. And we're not going to see a restoration of trust until cops stop shooting unnecessarily, and they've got to stop shooting to kill in situations where their lives are not directly threatened. And we see so much deference to police officers, and the Trump campaign is using law and order as a wedge issue. Even with African Americans, they're trying to appeal to blacks who want a strong police department. And so it's really troubling to see this showdown continue. The New York Times, editorializing on Friday, released the Charlotte police video. The police department in Charlotte has responded in exactly the wrong way to a police officer's killing on Tuesday of a black man. It has opted for stonewalling. It's refused to make public the video that might show how the shooting occurred. And the police chief added to that anger at a news conference when he said that the video would not give him absolute definitive visual evidence that would confirm that a person is pointing a gun, though he insisted there was evidence to suggest that the police account of the event is correct. Now, we're learning that the victim in this case, Keith Scott, had a criminal record. We just heard from his wife for the first time that he has a traumatic brain injury. He spent time in prison in Texas for shooting a man. And he also worked as a security guard. It's not clear whether he was an armed security guard and that he carried a weapon as part of his work. And his conviction for shooting a man was in Texas. He's been living in North Carolina, so it's not clear to me whether he was, as a convicted felon, banned from possessing a weapon. In any case, these are factors that weren't known to the officers at the time that they shot first and thought about it later. Now, while the death of Terrence Crutcher in Tulsa is no less shocking, the authorities there have reacted, I think, appropriately. They didn't sit on the video and say, we need a compelling reason to release it. They knew there was a compelling reason. And yesterday, the prosecutor filed charges against Betty Jo Shelby, the 42-year-old officer who shot Mr. Crutcher. She is being charged with first-degree manslaughter, which could carry a minimum sentence of 4 years and a term much longer if they throw the book at her. And it is encouraging, or at least somewhat satisfying, to hear the Tulsa District Attorney's Office say in an affidavit that Officer Shelby became emotionally involved to the point that she overreacted and fired her weapon even though she was not able to see any weapons or bulges indicating that Crutcher had a gun. And that language is, I think, fair in this case. And I will withhold judgment until there's a trial, and she's entitled to defend herself. But the information that she asserts is that Crutcher was reaching into the window of his vehicle, and that window was closed. So that tips me off that we cannot rely on her for the truth in this case. And here is a fascinating ruling that was just handed down Tuesday by the Massachusetts Supreme Judicial Court. They ruled that black men in Boston who avoid run-ins with cops may be justifiably motivated by a desire to avoid the recurring indignity of being racially profiled. And this comes out of a case of two men who were approached by cops in Roxbury. That's a neighborhood of Boston, kind of a tough area. And there had been a report of a crime, and the cop decided to figure out who these guys were and where they were coming from and maybe do what's called a field interrogation observation. So the cop rolled down his window and said, "Hey, guys, wait a minute." and they took note that he was a cop. They turned around and jogged down a path into the park. Now, one of the men was later apprehended and searched by police. He didn't have any contraband at the time, but they found a weapon nearby and claimed it was his. I don't have enough evidence to know if that's accurate. But in the ruling, the court determined the police were not justified in stopping him. Lacking any information about facial features, hairstyle, skin tone, and other details, the victim's description contribute nothing to the officer's ability to distinguish the defendant from any other black male wearing a hoodie in Roxbury. And the court went on. We do not eliminate flight as a factor in the reasonable suspicion analysis whenever a black male is the subject of an investigatory stop. In such circumstances, flight is not necessarily probative of a suspect's state of mind or consciousness of guilt. Rather, the finding that black males in Boston are disproportionately and repeatedly targeted for encounters suggests a reason for flight totally unrelated to consciousness of guilt. Even after the ruling continues. Even after controlling for crime, Boston police officers were more likely to initiate police encounters in black neighborhoods and to initiate encounters with black people. Boston police gave essentially no justification for 75% of these encounters. Now, that is essentially a variation on stop and frisk. And Donald Trump in Pittsburgh yesterday, trying to score points about these police shootings this week, uses code words to appeal to advocates of law and order, people who are afraid, people who want to trust the police more than they trust protesters, for example. And while in one breath he says he laments the lack of spirit between whites and blacks and he encourages racial unity, he called for Chicago to use stop-and-frisk policing tactics that have been widely condemned as racial profiling. Now, there's no question Chicago has a crime problem. And I came out of Chicago. I know about the corruption in that police department. I also know that there are communities there are gangs, there are drug runners. It is a very violent city. But to suggest that stop and frisk, which has been suspended in New York by Mayor de Blasio, which produced a whole lot of paper and a whole lot of people alienated by the cops, this is really offensive. And it is sheer idiocy that unfortunately will be embraced by a large portion of the American electorate. And Trump also, once again, lied. He loves these exaggerations. He said more people are dying in Chicago than in Afghanistan. And the Associated Press fact-checked him and declared that simply isn't true in the same article. Now, following up on the case of Ahmad Rahami, who is accused of the pipe bombs and pressure cooker bombs that were placed in New York and New Jersey last weekend. Well, the FBI didn't tell you this, but the Guardian newspaper based in London, using anonymous sources in Pakistan, reports that Ahmad Rahami spent some time in a madrasa. These are the religious schools run by the very extreme Islamic elements, including the Wahhabis. This one was in Pakistan. He spent about 3 weeks there in 2011. And this is not an indication that he was radicalized at that time or that he learned how to make bombs or got orders to form a sleeper cell and surface in 2016. None of that. But it is interesting because the father of Ahmad Rahami has explained that he turned his own son into the FBI. He said, I don't know if he's a terrorist, but he watches some of these videos and he's acting, in ways that I consider to be strange. And the FBI did a kind of routine investigation, and they didn't pursue anything further. They knew that he went to Pakistan and that he had traveled to Afghanistan, I believe, as well. And there is a conflict between the FBI and the father, Ahmad Rahami, over exactly what the father said, what the FBI did, and what it all means today. And in my view, the FBI has been too busy framing up suspects who were set up by a paid FBI informant and provocateur. And from everything I can see, while there was contact with the FBI in the past, we have no indication that Rahami, was that they tried to flip him into becoming a source or a provocateur himself. We're not seeing any information from wiretaps or even from social media posts. Almost, at the end of this week, he was picked up on Monday. And so he may be a bona fide extremist living here in the United States. And the FBI missed him because there are over 500 of these schlubs that they have framed for alleged domestic terrorism since 9/11. And these misplaced priorities never get addressed. The FBI is above any kind of oversight or review or criticism, at least from our elected officials, perhaps because those elected officials are compromised by that very agency. Every day I pause for a second here to thank the people who support my work at the Peter B. Collins Podcast with your subscriptions. People like the amazing actor from Philly, Joey Perillo, Tim McKay, Gary Batterson, and Wendy Gebauer. They're all monthly subscribers here. Why don't you join them? Come on over to peterbcollins.com. You click on the menu button, it pulls down, you click on Become a Subscriber, and it takes you to the sign-up page. And I want to give you a quick update here because it's been about 3 weeks since we started distributing this daily news and comment podcast on YouTube. And yesterday I spent a little time looking at the analytics. And, it's early. Some of the podcasts get a handful of downloads, and some get tens or dozens. And I want you to share with your friends and others that they can easily access the podcast at YouTube. Just enter Peter B. Collins in the search window, and when you see the picture of Chloe next to my channel listing, click on that, and it'll take you to all the recent podcasts. What is really interesting to me is what in radio terms we call DXing. DXing is when somebody listens to a transmission and sends a postcard or a letter to the people who own the transmitter and say, hey, I heard your signal in this location at a certain day and time. And, before there were computer geeks, there were radio wave geeks. And I know a lot of people who DXed distant signals. And so this loosely falls into the DX category. But for example, one podcast, 9% of the downloads were from Turkey and Canada. And even more came from Thailand. Now, I know I have listeners scattered across the globe, but I didn't know about you folks in Thailand and Turkey. Welcome to the Peter B. Collins Podcast. The one I did about the new Ed Snowden movie, 81% of the shows were downloaded in the U.S., 19% in the U.K., and the rest in Canada and Switzerland. When I criticized the Washington Post for its attack on Ed Snowden, 72% of the downloads in the U.S., 14% Thailand, 13% Turkey, the rest in France, and hello, Cameroon. And let's see over here when I talked about whether the Democrats might have a backup plan if Hillary doesn't make it health-wise. 3% of the downloads in Turkey, 2.5% from Australia, and there's that listener in Cameroon. Also, Germany shows up, the United Kingdom, and Sweden. So thanks to all of you who have sampled the Peter B. Collins podcast, and wherever you are, please spread the word. Well, it's described as doomsday in Aleppo as the Syrian and Russian militaries are renewing their assault on that rebel-held city. And I think that it's just going to be reduced to rubble. That is my fear. And I have a hard time seeing, what they're fighting over these days because there is so little left of Syria. 27 people were killed in overnight bombing raids, and the Turks have announced that there will be a ground offensive in the coming days. Now, President Obama manages to avoid really being held accountable for his bad foreign policy, his bad military policy. And as you know, I'm a sharp critic of the incoherent mess that he has involved us in Syria. And Mark Landler, the White House reporter for the New York Times today, notes how Obama flies above it and keeps his distance. He lets John Kerry do the dirty work. And even at the summit meeting in China this month, he avoided negotiating anything about Syria with Putin, who was there. The claim is he doesn't want to elevate Putin's status. But I find this really curious, because Obama is still our president. Despite the fact that the Republicans won't allow his Supreme Court nominee to move forward, he is still the president. And he gave an interview to the historian Doris Kearns Goodwin, published yesterday in Vanity Fair. And he, it says, in a mix of candor and defensiveness, Obama said he had second-guessed himself more on Syria than any other issue during his presidency. He repeated his rejection of critics who said he should have armed the moderate rebels much earlier or carried through on his threat to take military action against Assad after we claim he fired poison gas at civilians in 2013. I do ask myself, was there something that we hadn't thought of? Well, at this point, he's applying the Teflon and leaving this huge turd for the successor who will take office in January. And the generals, I think from the Joint Chiefs, were up on Capitol Hill yesterday arguing against any kind of a collaboration with the Russians because they don't want to share our intelligence with them regarding Syria. I think that's extremely short-sighted, but that's the way the game is being played these days. Well, this week at the United Nations, a lot of people spoke, and President Rouhani of the Republic of Iran came to town, and he did have some mild criticisms for the United States, complaining that American restrictions on banking and dollar transactions are unfair, and they really weren't a part of the nuclear agreement. He also is stung by the Supreme Court ruling this past April, which has nothing to do with the nuclear accord, which permitted the U.S. to impound $2 billion in assets of the Iranian Central Bank. And Rouhani says that, to be quite frank with you, was an international heist. But this week it was also announced that the West will start selling airliners to the state of Iran, and the U.S. bested the European consortium called Airbus. Iran is buying 17 planes from Airbus and 80 from the U.S.-based multinational called Boeing. Well, turns out that deal wasn't so bad for the United States. Afghanistan has reached a draft peace deal with one of the warlords who has been hostile to the Kabul government since the 1990s. That would be Gulbuddin Hekmatyar. And he is sallying forth into Kabul over the next few days to sign this deal, but it could blow up the government because there is all kinds of rivalry between the nominal leader Ghani and Abdullah, who has a title but no power. And bringing Hekmatyar into the picture with his sordid history and the politics there could be very problematic. This weekend in Washington, many people I know are gathering for a pro-peace event called No War 2016. This is organized by people like David Swanson. Dennis Kucinich will be speaking, Harvey Wasserman, Medea Benjamin, Sam Husseini, Gareth Porter, the journalist, Tom Drake, the whistleblower, John Kiriakou, the whistleblower, Raed Jarar, who I've known for many years. He's an Iraqi who I think now works for the International Red Cross. And I think it's going to be a powerful event. You can get information on it at the website worldbeyondwar.org/No War 2016. I'll post the link in the show file for this podcast. And on Monday, many of the same people are going to take action at the Pentagon, where they will present a petition signed by more than 20,000 people arguing that the U.S. should shut down the Ramstein Air Force Base in southwestern Germany. That is where drones are controlled from and many other activities that we don't know much about. And that will occur on Monday at the Pentagon. Speaking of the Pentagon, a military panel in Fort Leavenworth, Kansas, has sentenced Chelsea Manning to 2 weeks of solitary confinement. They did suspend 1 week, which will hang over her in case she has any other infractions reported. And this is deeply outrageous. It's really just the latest outrage in the shoddy treatment of Chelsea Manning. But you may recall back around the 4th of July, she attempted suicide, and the Army charged her with resisting the force cell move team. She was unconscious, and they hauled her out of her cell. And it's the military equivalent of resisting arrest. Now, they acquitted her on that charge, but they found her guilty of conduct which threatens and prohibited property. So the property was she had a copy of a book called Hacker, Hoaxer, Whistleblower, Spy, The Many Faces of Anonymous. Chelsea quoted as saying, "I'm feeling hurt, I'm feeling lonely, I'm embarrassed by the decision, I don't know how to explain it." She does have an opportunity to appeal, and this is really just the cruel and unusual punishment that has been afforded to Chelsea Manning under the whistleblower crackdown, all driven by Barack Obama. Well, there's a lot of selective political outrage about the Wells Fargo fraud case, and I'd sure like to see John Stumpf resign as the CEO of Wells Fargo. But it's interesting to see the political characters who are now attacking Wells Fargo, a safe target, and they didn't lift a finger to crack down on the bank fraud that led to our meltdown in 2008. And they're still accepting contributions from people affiliated with Wall Street. But they're rushing to return money donated to their campaigns by Wells Fargo Bank. So a number of West Coast members of Congress have done that. Nancy Pelosi is outraged, but she took $7,500 from the bank's Political Action Committee into one of her PACs to get Democrats elected this year. And I've learned that Hillary Clinton has already received $258,000 from Wells Fargo. Will she return that? I'm not holding my breath. On the heels of yesterday's announcement of the massive hack of emails at Yahoo, we learn of a new email hack that exposed some of the details of fundraising activities by the Clinton campaign. A Gmail account linked to a guy who's just above the rank of intern, Ian Mellul, Mellul. That hack exposed names and cell phone numbers of Secret Service agents, spreadsheets with the names and Social Security numbers of campaign donors, and PowerPoint presentations showing step-by-step directions for how people like Vice President Joe Biden should move around when they show up at an event. Apparently it's mapped out in great detail for these dignitaries. So this is embarrassing. It doesn't appear to have any really significant information. But it makes 2016 the year of the hack. And finally today, Barack Obama is threatening sometime this afternoon to veto the bill called JASTA, Justice for Sponsors of Terrorism, is what the acronym loosely stands for. And this passed the House almost unanimously. It passed the Senate earlier this year by a veto-proof margin. And Obama has often threatened to veto bad bills, over and over again. And the one that really sticks with me is the detention clause in the 2012 budget bill for the Pentagon, where they basically said if you're accused of terrorism, we can hold you without charge or trial at a military facility. Obama threatened to veto that, but he didn't. And now he's threatening to veto JASTA, and if he does, the House and Senate are planning to extend their sessions. They wanted to wrap up and go back to campaign and pander to their bases. But they see value in taking on Obama one last time before the November elections by overriding his veto. And while it's something I want to see because I think the bill should become law, it appears to be the only way we might hold the Saudis accountable for their role in 9/11. But the real tragedy to me is that Obama has been so chintzy in using his veto to block egregious legislation from Capitol Hill. Thanks for joining me today for News and Comment. This podcast is available on YouTube. Can you spread the word? I'm Peter B. Collins.
Happy trails to you until we meet again. Happy trails to you. Keep smiling